How's it going, guys? So we are live right now at the PhantomCave studios, and today's live stream we're going to be basically having a look at the 2021 Christmas special. We've got 5 stories to look at, and I'm just going to say that when these like when these Christmas specials actually come out, I get really excited. I get really excited, and let's get into it. So, firstly, we've got the cover art by Glenn Lubston, which you would be able to see on the thumbnail, which is pretty cool. And yeah, let's get into it. So, the first story that is coming out the first story in this book is Free Ava Front. Now, there's sort of a there's sort of um, a fugitive from basically from the Misty Mountains, and she is basically trying to get support to basically overthrow this empire person or this treacherous person who is in all bad sorts, basically. And obviously, she gets ambushed by the troops of Avaria. It's where this story sometimes takes place. The Phantom hears of these people and investigates. So the Phantom, he makes his way in. The evil person in this comic is the Queen of Avaria, and the Phantom's nearly basically has nearly saved the young fugitive, and in for paying basically for him saving this person, he basically gets stabbed in the chest by a poison dagger, basically. And what I like about this story is because obviously the Phantom, it's all action packed. A lot of things are happening in this story, but the Phantom, he shows his immortality in not he shows his immortality by basically having this little dagger inside him, which at the time when this dagger had been thrown, it hadn't gone into um, a vital organ, which then would have resulted in the Phantom obviously possibly dying. So I reckon it's quite a good story. We obviously see the Phantom, he rips the dagger out, and the dagger had barbed ends designed to stick and not come out. They were stuck in the cartilage between my sternum and ribs. The Kagan's fingernails aren't her only poison delivery system, fellas. She got me with a knockout drug the first time, and now one that brings on a temporarily paralysis. She knew I could hear that speech she gave, how I could have been Kajan. She ruling at my side as a Khatan. What might my partner on the Varian throne poison me, and next I wonder. So then the Phantom, he goes to try and find where this so called camp is now at. He finds the camp. He's obviously changed costumes. He finally basically rescues the fugitive, and basically they think that they're about to get away. They're about to go on a big adventure and basically elude everyone and basically go out of the scene. But the emperor's orders are saying, "After her! I'll have all your heads on spikes for this." The Phantom escapes with Clot tied, a heroine of the Free Ava Front. Pursuers race by. It seems the entire camp is after you. Well, wait here until obviously sundown. So he then gets his good old friend President Luaga, and he wants to basically try and save this country from being a he wants this country to have a democratic sort of voting system, and it's not like a dictator in the such. So the fugitive, she meets up with the soldiers that had been chasing her, and the soldiers are willing to put their lives on the line and basically try and get a bit of freedom for their people. The Queen doesn't like that, and she says, "Treason!" And then the Phantom is then talking to President Luaga, and that's where the Phantom leaves us. He goes back to the Skull Cave and writes his notes down. But one thing I would like to point out in this story is I know it's a Jeff Weigel story, but one thing I've been looking at, and one thing that I've been noticing in the latest Sundays and dailies, is because look how precision artwork that is. Look how neat that is. Like, I'll be showing you. Look how good that is. Like, look at the skull and then look at the coloring. It's so damn cool. And then we enter in. Now, this story is it's probably one of my favorites in this book. It's called The Spy Ship. Now, for one, it's obviously going to be about something to do with history. But for one, why this story is one of my favorites in this book is because it develops a bit of history in the story, and you'll always know that I do like a bit of history myself, and I think history in general is interesting. So, who will be the historical figure that is going to appear in this story? Will it be Will it be an American Civil War Captain Walker? No. Would it be the American writer Ambrose Bierce? He unfortunately disappeared in Mexico in 1913. Or would it be George III? Or, yeah, George III, Thomas Paine, we've got in this story, who is very historical. We've got KP. He led Japanese and Chinese rebel army against the Dutch colonial rule. But we finally decide on the historical figure being George Bass. Now, what is interesting, I find, about this story, obviously, is because um, obviously it's going to be history. It's going to be stuff that I actually want to read, and it's something that obviously George Bass in this story, it's a pretty good one, I reckon so. But in George Bass's in this story, he's what you'd say what in like normal lifestyle style, he would be one of the most um, influential and one of the most historical figures in history, basically. Another one I can think of is probably Winston Churchill. Another one may be another one that I highly regard is obviously President Lincoln, which is pretty damn cool. If you've got like a historical figure that you're basically admiring, or it's like her, his or hers, basically um, admire. So you then like the character, or you like the history of you, or you like um, what that historical person has done, basically. How's it going with Spin Grove? We're going to, right now, we're looking at the 2021 Phantom Christmas special. So, the current story that we're up to is the spy ship. And this, as I was talking, has George Bass in it, who is one of the most influential, you'd say, one of the most influential historical figures, I reckon. Um, what makes this story so interesting? Obviously, it's because of the deception. It's because of the just because like you've got the Phantom, Mr. Walker, you've got George Bass. He obviously is trying. He obviously in this story he's disappeared. No one knows where he is. He pops up at all these ports to raise suspicion of, is George Bass still alive? Where has he gone? And why has it taken them so long to try and find out where George Bass is? So he then basically gets he gets ambushed by this guy, which we'll find out what happens to him. The Phantom and George Bass basically leave him alone, but the Phantom knows that this this guy is actually lying about why he was following the Phantom and George Bass. George Bass leaves the port and raises a number of flags, which actually make it safer for him to be around other ships whose nation flag actually they're basically the nation ships. Um, yeah, in the later parts of the story, we're obviously going to be seeing that George Bass meets up with leads up with Admiral Horatio Nelson, a man fated to die in the battle to come off Cape Trafalgar. Now, the main battle in this comic book and the main battle that's in the story is obviously the Battle of Trafalgar, and that's probably most of the time that's probably one of the interesting things about reading stuff that involves history. One of the biggest people who's actually his birthday today, one of the biggest people that wrote a lot of stories to do with historical figures is obviously the legendary Charles Clay's Charles Ree Murphy. Claves Ree Murphy. So then basically the Phantom and George Bass are then attacked, thinking that the other ship's people are then thinking, oh, this must be enemy ship. They then destroy George Bass's ship. The Phantom then takes care of George Bass, and by the time he's wanting to try and visit his wife, he passes away. What a shocking end to this story, but doesn't just end there. We have the Phantom, we have a present, past Phantom or Mr. Walker that actually goes to London or England and tells, actually tells the wife and the associates that are associated with the wife, what had actually happened to George Bass, and that's where we're going to leave it. And while the Phantom is basically telling Heloise what has happened to George Bass, Diana is basically keeping Kadia basically um, keeping Kadia active and not thinking about where is Heloise. So the next story we have is unfinished business. So the Phantom he rocks up at a prison, being that this prison actually holds one of the most infamous villains of all time. Now that villain of all time is obviously this big guy. This guy. Now I can't remember what his name's called. I can't remember. So then, when the Phantom is finished with this guy, he then basically dispatches him, and the Phantom then runs off. He and that's basically the end of the story. He runs off. It's just a short story, and then goes. I'm guessing back to Bengala. We have an ad. So the Phantom and the Ghost and the Monster now available. Graphic novel number two. You can get it $34.95 plus postage. The world's greatest myth meets the world's greatest monster. Now graphic novel Oh, this graphic novel. I read a insert about this. Obviously on one of the back pages of the Phantom Comics last year, and this graphic novel, it's supposed to do stuff with Frankenstein, basically, which is pretty interesting. Now, this story, I'm not too keen on this story. It was getting quite interesting. It was getting quite interesting, but then the Phantom, I think, goes a little bit crazy or something, or is still under the impression that obviously he's in these trees, these big forests, which are making him go insane, basically. Um, and he tries and envisions that the Python has actually stolen his gear, and by the time all that happens, he runs out of the forest in big, discreet sort of manner. And what does he come across? What does he come across? He comes across a unrecognizable. He comes across a place where, as fans, we're saying, but how's this? How is how is there two skull caves? How is there two man-made surfaces where there's two or more phantoms residing in this skull cave? How is there possibly two people or two skull caves in this story? Like, how is there that many phantoms in this universe? And that's where it's not just going to get crazier, it's going to get oh damn crazier. So this story I'm not too keen on because it was going alright, it was traveling at the same pace, and then gets crazier and crazier and crazier. That's why I'm not too keen on this. Now the Phantom, he obviously gets out of the forest. He doesn't believe Babu Dan, and he doesn't believe Guran. But then Guran says, "No, I'm not actually going to tell you the secret of that forest. It stays in closed lips." And by the time that all happens, that's the end of the story. Okay, so we have pretty much this book has a very, I would say, very big, I would say, very, a lot, big story. So we have one of the first actual, I would say, one of the last news stories for 2021, which is called The Phantom in Lifeblood. Now, it's written by Dean Rankine, who I think is Australian. Pardon me. It's drawn by Jeremy MacPherson, who is an amazing person, and he's also a big supporter of this show. And it's also coloured by Thomas Mason, who also is an amazing person, and edited by the legendary Glenn Ford. So, one thing I would like to say about this story before we end things, I the colours, literally the colours, it's stunning. Like I'm not going off first impressions. I've already looked at this story, and obviously I've already basically read it. That's why I'm showing it to you. But my first impressions on opening the next page after all the Sundays and dailies was that wow, just wow. The colors are stunning. The vibrancy in the sunset. Oh, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. It was and still is. So damn cool. So yeah, it's basically I would say this story, it's basically about life and how life throws you struggles, but you just get over it and you move forward, and you basically you move when you move forward, you're creating solutions to those problems so that you can move forward, and so that you can make the most of obviously your life basically. But one of the last things I would like to say is, I'd like to put this question to you. Imagine if you had, like regular publishers comics or Shakti's ones, imagine a few Phantom comic having this sort of paper, glossy sort of paper, but in color, it has glossy paper, and it's it would be awesome. It would be awesome, but that I'm not too sure how obviously the price would be one thing to consider. Obviously, how much money you're wanting to put into comics, obviously, and the materials that needed to be sourced. That's just my opinion. Do you think in the comments section below, do you think that some comics in Australia that have been around for almost past 70 years, like few publications, do you think that we should possibly, as fans, be able to experience a comic or regular comic with glossy pages and with those beautiful colors? Well, there we have it, folks. We've got Merry Christmas from Pew. And again, I'd like to say, beautiful cover done by Glenn Lobston. And if you would like to subscribe to the PhantomCave YouTube channel, you can do so by hitting that subscribe button. We're going to be making a whole big year of content, and it's going to be epic. It's going to be fantastic. So I hope you enjoyed this live stream. If you're catching it after the live, have a great day. Have a great night wherever you are from in this world. And as always, keep phantom caving.